All right, so for the first assignment, you'll need to set up a development environment. Okay, and the development environment that we're going to be using for the first half of the semester, all right, we're going to be using the technology stack of React in the front end, Java in the middle tier, and a relational database MySQL for data storage. All right, that's the stack that we're going to focus for the first, 6 weeks of this course, right? After the break, when we come back, we'll switch and we'll use another framework, the mean stack framework, where we'll revisit this. And for the client, we'll replace it with Angular. For the middle tier, we'll replace it with Node.js, and for the data storage, we'll use MongoDB. But for now, we'll be setting up this environment. We'll need to make sure that you have Java installed in the middle tier. We'll have to set up Maven. Maven is a tool that allows us to compile, build, and deploy and run tests, right, on the server side. This will allow us to create jar files or war files, Java war files, and deploy them into in Heroku later, and run them locally as we'll see. But you'll need to download and install Maven if you don't already have it. You can download it from maven.apache.org download.cgi, and once it's installed, you should be able to. It will add the mvn command, which will allow you to run compile this. Yes.
I didn't see anything about testing under like any of the assignments and things like that.
No, you're not. Yeah, no testing in this course. There's a whole different course that deals with lots and lots of testing. Yeah, not here. You also need to set up Heroku. Heroku is where we're going to be hosting our applications, our web applications. So you should open up an account at Heroku. It's free, and you'll also need to download the command line interface. So it'll install an executable in your local environment that will allow you to deploy your Spring Boot application and your Node.js applications, or your Angular or your React application. It'll allow you to deploy them on the remote servers. Okay, so download this from there, and for your particular operating system, to follow the instructions there to download and implement install the CLI. Once you download it and you have Heroku installed, you'll be able to type in Heroku, right, and you'll be able to log in. So this will connect to your account that you created remotely on Heroku.com, and will allow you to do things such as deploy, restart servers, run the tails, so you can debug the remote server if anything went wrong. Why is it not running? Things like that. Spring Boot, you'll need to also download and install the Spring command line interface, which will allow you to create these Spring Boot applications. And they're available at that hyperlink, Spring CLI, and that's the documentation. On Mac OS, it's fairly simple to install. If you have Brew, you can just say brew install Spring Boot. This will download and install it locally. If you don't have Brew, you can run Ruby to install it locally. If you're using a Windows, you can follow the instructions at that hyperlink on installing the Spring CLI. Once you have the Spring CLI, you can create a brand new application by using this command, which I already have. So I'm going to demonstrate. So for instance, if we go to a command line, and if we go to webdev, and we go to, let's see, 2019, Spring, videos. Okay, so here we're going to create a brand new application. So I'm just going to copy that. But I am going to call it, let's see, CS, or I'm just calling it webdev. So this is Spring 19, and this is going to be a server. and it's going to be a Java server, not Node.js, right? So next, in a couple of weeks, we'll create a server that is a Node.js server, right? But the server means that this is the functionality of what we're building, and it's a Java server as opposed to a Node.js server that we'll build a little later down the road. Okay, so let's do that. So this is going to bring down a template, and it creates a directory. And there it is, webdev. So we can go in there. So you'll see that the only thing that it's here is the pom.xml here that's of interest, right? So this is a common type of application. It's referred to as a POM application. A POM is a project object model, I believe. It describes the dependencies of your project. It says this particular project has the following characteristics. It has this particular name. It depends on these other libraries that need to be present, installed in your application for your application to run, right? And also has a couple of source. So we can do ls that source main Java example. There it is. It has it has a single Java file, which is called demo application.java. All right. So that's the only Java file that it generates for you, and that Java file only has a main, and that main can start your application. Right. Start your server and start listening at the default of a port of 8080. Right. So it's very, very easy to get started with this. So let's demonstrate. We can create a. Ooh, I don't have that. We can create a directory at source main and create web app, and then we can create a file under source main web app and an index.html, and we'll say h1 welcome to webdev. Okay, you're going to say Control C. Now that we have some content, we can just build the project. Notice that here we don't have a target directory. Notice that there's no target directory. But if we do a Maven clean install, it's going to compile the application. It's going to build it. It's going to run any tests if I have any tests, and it's going to generate a jar file and put it in the target directory. So if we look at the notice that there's a target directory, and we can take a look at what's inside of the target directory. In here we have this jar file that contains the compiled file of that Java file, right? Plus any dependencies, any other libraries that we needed. They're in there, and we just have to execute that jar file locally to get this running. Right, so we can say java.jar run whatever's in the target, and then the webdev server.jar. So this is going to start the server, and it's going to listen at port 8080, or maybe not. Maybe I already have something running on 8080. Failed Tomcat connector configure listens to port. The port may already be. What do I have running? Is this running? Spring suit quit maybe. I probably have already something running on 8080. Try it again. Okay, so it looks like it's running and listening on 8080. So, okay, so Tomcat started and listening on port 8080. So we can now go to our browser and say localhost, oops, not that, 8080, and it loads that index file we created, right? So it's very easy to get started implementing some really simple web content in here, web application. Everybody okay? All right. Once we have this, we can easily also deploy this on Heroku. This asks you to set up a MySQL Workbench as well. We won't be needing MySQL Workbench for a couple of weeks, not quite yet, but just to get you started, you should start downloading it at least. Spring Tool Suite is it's an IDE that is specifically designed to work well with Spring Boot. The only caveat is that it's Eclipse based, and many folks don't like Eclipse. So if you prefer IntelliJ, you'll need to configure it to work with Spring Boot. Node.js, we won't be using Node.js not until we get to React. Okay, so you can wait up a little bit before you install Node.js, but when we get to React, you'll need Node.js. We won't need MongoDB until almost the end of the course, right? But I'd rather you have this pain early on, and if you run into issues, we can start helping you set up the environment as opposed to waiting way at the end of the semester and trying to install this. So you can download MongoDB and run it locally on your machine. GitHub, we ask you to create a GitHub repository and create a repo for this. So let's do that. Let's stop the server. Let's see. Notice that there is already a git ignore there. See that? There's a git ignore. We can take a look at that. So more dot git ignore. Notice that the git ignore file. How are we doing with GitHub? Do you feel confident with GitHub? All right. Do you feel you're an expert at Git? Some of you. Okay. All right. That's fine. This lists all the files that should be ignored and should not make it into a source control. Right? For instance, we don't want any jar files in the source control. We don't want any libraries. Anything that is compiled, right? Any binary file should not go into source control. Right? We should only put source in source control. Right? So .java, .javascript, .css, .html, all that is source, and that should go into source control. But no .class, right? No .exe, no .jar, no .war, no libraries should go into source control. And this just lists all the files that it's going to ignore, and all the directories that it's going to ignore. And it's already set up for us. We don't have to do anything here. So we can already just commit our very first. Actually, no, it's not created yet, right? There's no .git. Notice that there's no .git, so we need to initialize it, right? So we have to say git init. So we initialize it. I can't type today, geez. Notice there's a .git now, and now we can start committing our source into source control. So we can say git add dot. That's going to add all our source into our current repository. So we can do git status. So this says that all these files were added to the local repository, and they're ready to be pushed or committed to a remote repository. Right now, we only have the .java properties, HTML, and we're going to say git commit with a message of saying first commit with simple hello index. There we go. So we committed all that, and now we need to make this available on a GitHub repository. So to do that, we can go to GitHub, so github.com, and create a brand new repository. I'm going to use the same name that I used here. I'm going to use that same name, right, so I can keep it straight in my head, right, what is going to go where. So I'm going to say, am I not logged in? I am. So I'll go to repositories. I can say a new repository. I'm going to create a new repository with that name. It says OK, that's a good name. Create. And this gives me a cheat sheet on how to add this as a remote repository in my local repository. This is my local repository, right? Where is it? it's under my git.git. Right? All that source code that I just committed, everything lives under .git. Right? And it keeps track of all the history of all my source code. I want to send it over to a remote repository so I can share it with my team members, or share it with my TAs, or share it with me if I run into problems, right? And I want some help from you. Well, you help from me. Wait. So we want to share it. We're going to be able to share the source code. Right now, the source code only lives locally in my machine. So to share it here, let's see. We already did git init. We already added something. We already committed something, so we don't need to do any of that. We only need to add this new repository as a remote. Okay? And so this says, notice it says git remote add. So it's going to add this as a remote repository. And it's going to be my default. It's going to be my default repository. That's what origin means. It means that this is the, whenever you push your changes, right, this is going to be the default repository where it's going to go. It's going to be deployed, it's going to be copied onto that repository. It's going to be my default. So I'm just going to copy that line. I'm going to paste it. Now it added it as a remote. Notice that I can list all the remotes. I only have one. I can ask to be verbose, and it tells me it's called origin. And if you send something, it's going to push. If you push your source code, that's where it's going to go. It's going to be copied on that remote server, a repository. If you fetch, if you pull your source, it's going to copy from here. So anything you push or pull is going to go into there. So we are ready to push. I'm going to push. So now it's going to take all my commits and it's going to send it over to my remote. If I refresh this page, it's going to have the list of all my source that I originally had locally on my machine. Now it's going to live remote on my remote server, on my remote repository. Everybody okay? Everybody should at least know how to do that if you've done Git before, right? So this is what I'm going to ask you to submit for. This is going to be one of your deliverables. This for the first assignment, right? You're gonna copy that URL and you're going to share it. You're going to put it in your Blackboard as a. You're going to copy it in there, copy and paste it, okay? And you're going to invite myself and the TAs. You're going to go to settings. You're going to say collaborators. And then collaborators, you're gonna type in Giannunzi and add me as a collaborator. You're gonna add all the TAs also as collaborators, right? So we're gonna be able to come in here and help you, right? And see all your source code and whatnot. Okay. All right. And it'll search. There it is. That's me. So I'm not gonna add myself. Everybody good? All right. Excellent. All right, so let's keep going. Push origin, releases. Oh, so also when you're done, at the end when you've completed all your work, you're going to go to releases, right? So when you're done with your first assignment and you want to submit this as part of your what you want the TAs to grade, you go to releases, and you'll say create a new release. You'll say the release will be assignment 1, right? And say publish release, and that's my release, right? So TAs, once they know your repository, they're going to be able to come here. They're going to be able to go to your releases and see that you have your first release. That release will allow them, see this over here? That's the number, that's the commit number that will allow them to see what is it that you did. And they'll see, oh, okay, I see. You added a properties file. you added an HTML file, you added this Java file, they'll see what you did for the assignment. All right? And they're going to be able to clone, right, your repository to that specific commit and be able to grade you all your work up until that commit. Right? So you can keep working on the second assignment with no problem, right? Because there's always going to be a particular release that they can always go in and grade. Everybody good? All right, awesome. All right, so let's take a look at deploying this to Heroku.